Welcome back. All right, so a couple weeks ago I talked about the East and Stanley Cup contenders in the East, and now we're going to talk about the West. And of course, things are a little bit different in the West than in the East. And when you're looking at odds-on favorites, and I got these from FanDuel's website, so you can check. I didn't mess this up at all. But Seattle's not in the top eight for the odds. I don't necessarily agree with that. They're tied with St. Louis and Vancouver. So that's strange. But again, I do like to go by, another website's rankings because if I put up 8 teams, there's going to be a lot of why didn't you include this? So this way, it's not my choice. But I want to talk about these 8 teams, and I'm going to say in Seattle's case, the if you feel like this is great disrespect to Seattle, there's going to be that expectation of, well, they had a season that was fantastic, but they're probably going to fall back, and that's, I think, at least my guess is the thinking with how people are betting. Although the betting as well is going to be influenced by where you're getting those from, and maybe there's more Canadian bets coming in than elsewhere. But anyways, 2022-2023 was quite the season for Colorado on the ice, 51-24-7, but they were not able to repeat as Stanley Cup champions, taken out in the first round by the team that did not make the top 8. So their starter is Georgiev, and there will be questions about Georgiev's ability come playoff time until he does take them on a run to at least a conference final. Whether that's fair or not, we can have that discussion, but that's kind of standard with goaltenders. When you have a goaltender who comes in as your number one guy for a contending team, especially taking over from Darcy Kemper, who helped them get a Stanley Cup in 2022, there's going to be some questions about whether or not he can be the guy. Then you get into the core four. So I'm using the same criteria I did for the Eastern Conference. The core four, McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, and Taves, I think are the core four there. Now, of course, Taves is a UFA next summer. His cap hit, I believe, is what, 4.1 million, and you look at all the hype around him, he could easily double that number. He could double that number next year, and so that could become a headache for them, but it's not a problem this year. As I said, they were the 2022 Stanley Cup champions. There's no reason to think they can't be champs again, so I totally understand why they're the odds-on favorite out of the West. Their captain, of course, Gabe Landeskog, did not play and is not going to play during the regular season this year. There is that outside chance maybe for playoffs this year. It's unlikely. Yeah, I know. It's unlikely, but they can hold out hope if they want to. For the Colorado Avalanche, not having Landeskog is rough, but I totally agree with them not naming a new captain either. He is the captain. You hold that job for him unless he comes out and says, I'm not going to be able to play again. And that has not been stated by him or by anybody that I've seen. So Landeskog not being there, they have to kind of rally around it the way Tampa Bay did when they were without Stamkos. Then you got Edmonton. So they're number 2 in the odds, and I agree with this. And yet Edmonton, I don't think necessarily gets the respect. They're 50-23-9 last season. Stuart Skinner emerged as the starter. I debated about whether or not to put Campbell up there. Now, the cap hit for Campbell is high, but I do think Jack Campbell's going to have a bounce-back season. It should be interesting to see how it works out in Edmonton, because if he doesn't, he might be headed towards a buyout next summer. But again, we'll see what happens there, right? So the core four for Edmonton, I kind of went back and forth on this a bit. So McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent, Hopkins, obviously that'd be 3 of your core four. And I included Darnell Nurse. Look, his contract's expensive, but he plays a ton of minutes on the blue line. Does he make mistakes? Sure. But he can also be a very effective defenseman. Being overpaid doesn't make you a bad player, but fans will look at a guy who's overpaid, and I think they get overly critical. So they were conference finalists last year, but of course, they also have been eliminated 2 straight seasons by the eventual Stanley Cup champions, Colorado in 2022, Vegas in the second round this year in 2023. Their captain's Connor McDavid. He's one of the best captains in the game. And so for Edmonton, it does feel like, their window's open and it's time, because next summer they're going to have to deal with looking at what Draisaitl's going to be worth on an extension. And spoiler alert, it's well over $10 million a year. Then we get to Dallas. Now, Dallas is the team I'm picking to come out of the West. There's others picking to come out of the West as well. They went 47, 21, and 14 this past season. The 14's a little bit concerning, but whatever. Ottinger, of course, their starting goaltender. He had ups and downs this past year, and then in the playoffs had a rough time against Vegas. Who didn't? And their core four, I went with Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski, and Heiskanen. Now, their captain's Jamie Benn. I would include him in the core four, but Jamie Benn's kind of a divisive person within Dallas fandom. There are those who think he's been a great captain. There are those who think, in the playoffs, they played better without him. So I did not include him in the core four, and I think Pavelski belongs there because his play with Hintz and Robertson's been fantastic. So you can equate uh, Robertson and Hintz, I think, with helping Pavelski look 10 years younger, but I think you can also equate Pavelski making Hintz and Robertson better players. So it's mutually beneficial. And of course, for Dallas, they were a finalist in 2020, a conference finalist in 2023. They've already shown they're a contender. And again, with Jamie Benn as their captain, he's still there. There was, of course, discussions of could they end up trading him? That contract's not tradable, so no. Vegas 51, 22, and 9. And yes, the fact that they're fourth in the odds is strange to me a little bit because they're the defending champions. But this is not really new. Logan Thompson, I think will still be the starter. I know what Aiden Hill did during the playoffs. That was a great run. Thompson, I think, is still the better of the two goaltenders. Their core four, I went with Eichel, Marchessault, Pietrangelo, and Theodore. So two defensemen and two forwards there. Marchessault, of course, winning the Conn Smythe Trophy this year, and Eichel really took that next step for them as well as they won the Cup this year. And Mark Stone is their captain. I didn't put him in the core four. You want to put him in the core four, you absolutely can. I will say this for Las Vegas. This offseason was a heck of a lot more just standard. Like it was a normal offseason. We didn't see any offloading of expensive contracts or getting rid of somebody truly beloved. While Riley Smith was beloved by Vegas fans since day one, I don't think that there was nearly the outcry with Smith being out as there was when Marc-Andre Fleury exited the team, right? So I think Vegas, PR-wise, they had a good summer too. LA, 47, 25, and 10 this past season. Talbot's earmarked as their starter this year. Their core four, I went with Kopitar, Kempe, Fiala, and Doughty. So Kopitar and Doughty, yep, a little bit older than some of the other core fours on the board, but they're winners. And from what I saw the game last night between Arizona and LA, which if you looked at the copious amounts of notes was a lot of it, Kopitar and Doughty are still prime players in this league. Of course, the LA Kings lost in the first round both this season and last season as well. They're looking to get over the hump there. Anze Kopitar being their captain, and Kopitar, absolutely fantastic two-way forward. Does he win the Selke? We'll see, right? And then you get to Minnesota, and this is where things are interesting too, because you can make an argument for Colorado, you can make an argument for Vegas going back and winning another Stanley Cup. I think you can make an argument for the Oilers and for Dallas, and maybe for LA, because 2012, 2014, they were underdogs, they were not top seeds, and they came together at the right time. They've still got Kopitar, they've still got Doughty. There's still some of that mystique there. Minnesota, of course, has not had a good last 2 decades when it comes to playoff hockey. 2003 was the last time they got to the conference final. It's got to be getting a little bit tough for Minnesota fans, a little bit repetitive. They make the playoffs, and then they're out. So they were 46, 25, and 11 this past season. Gustafsson has emerged as the starter. I don't think that changes this year. This could very well be Fleury's last year as a National Hockey League goaltender. The core four, I went with Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Spurgeon, and Boldy. Matt Boldy, who, based on what I've seen online with reactions to video I did earlier this summer, I think people underrate Boldy just a little bit. Anyways, the futility since 2003 stands out, and if Rossi could come in and camp, and everything seems to indicate Rossi's done a good job in the offseason of getting himself ready for this year, if he could emerge as a real threat for them up front, that could help quite a bit. Jared Spurgeon being their captain, and as I've mentioned recently, I think he's underrated. So Minnesota's an interesting one because it is tough to argue, okay, they'll win the Stanley Cup if. And I'm not saying they can't. It's just it gets tough to argue. And then you get to Calgary. All the uncertainty about the Calgary Flames, 38, 27, and 17, not a great record. They missed the playoffs last year, but they have bounced back before. So Markstrom's their starting goaltender. He leads the list of guys who need to have that bounce back, co-headlined with Jonathan Huberdeau, who I put in the core four because he's starting an 8-year contract. If he's not part of the core four, there's a problem. I also included Anderson, Lindholm, and Kadri. And I wanted to put Backlund in there, but I thought, well, Kadri's got the longer term contract. They need a bounce back from him as well. A lot of bounce backs needed for Calgary. Can they get them? They could. They were first in their division in 2022. They missed the playoffs in 2023. Can they bounce back? Currently, as I'm recording this, they do not have a captain. There's been rumors about Backlund, that Backlund will end up as the captain, and he may very well become the captain. But at this point in time, they do not have a team captain. And with Backlund, what really kind of complicates that is he does not have a contract beyond this season. So you don't want to give somebody the captaincy and then have to deal him at the trade deadline because you haven't got an extension. He's not going to stay. So we may very well see Calgary go without a captain this year. We'll see. And then we get to Winnipeg. Winnipeg 46-33-3 this past season. Connor Hellebuck is, at this point in time, still a Jet, and based on what he told the press, he should be a Jet for this season. He absolutely should. He's open to sticking around. I'd be very surprised if he gets moved because the Jets have to get a starting goaltender back if they trade him. So I do expect all the fantasy booking to be trades. All the armchair GMs are going to be trading him for John Gibson out of Anaheim. But I don't know that Connor Hellebuck would like that idea either, right? Anaheim is just in a full-on rebuild. The core four for Winnipeg, I went with Connor, Scheifele, Morrissey, and Ehlers. Went back and forth on who should be in that four, and I decided on Ehlers as the fourth, and I included Scheifele despite his contract status. Just like in Calgary, I included Lindholm despite his contract status, just because of the fact they need the points, they need the goals from these players. And it's interesting that Calgary and Winnipeg are given about the same odds because I think there's an equal amount of unpredictability in how this season's going to go with these contract extensions hanging over the heads of some of these guys, at least from the point of view of the media, right? I don't know how the guys in the locker room feel about it. I don't know if they care that much. Like this is the year. They're under contract for this year. We're not going to worry about whether or not they're coming back until next summer. Why are we worried about that? They're still here. So the Jets missed the playoffs in 2022, and then they lost in the first round of 2023. They've definitely taken a step back from their true contender status back in, I'd say, 2018's where that peaked, and it's kind of tailed off since then, but they've still got a lot of good players. They can still score, and they've got one of the better goalies in the league. Adam Lowry named the captain recently. Lowry's a fantastic forward. Definitely a solid third-line option for them. And it's nice to see that not all captains have to be superstars to be captains, which generally hasn't been the case in the NHL. It does feel like the lesser-known player getting the captaincy is a lot less frequent now than it might have been in the 80s. But whether it's teams pay a certain amount of money now for that star power, so you better be a leader, or whether it's just, coaches and GMs have changed what they view as that leadership. But it definitely seems to have shifted. So again, Seattle doesn't quite make the board, and St. Louis and Vancouver, I think, being tied in odds, that seems odd to me. With Seattle, of course, and I'll talk about this, their record was better than about half the teams on this board. Their starting goaltender is Grubauer, which there's that divided opinion on with him. Core four for them, I would go with McCann. I would go with Dunn. I would go with Beniers, obviously. Yanni Gourde, I'm kind of tempted to put in that core four as well, but Adam Larson, right, defensive defenseman, and they made the playoffs this past season when not expected to make the playoffs, and according to what the betting odds are right now, they may be seen as a team that could regress this season. But yeah, I will be curious to see how this all works out. And I do hope for the best for Seattle because I don't expect Vancouver in the playoffs. It would be nice if one of the two teams that are within a couple hours of each other, driving wise, if you're going to see one in the playoffs because the other one's not going to make it. So if Vancouver doesn't make it, it'd be nice to see Seattle in again. And as they proved last spring, they absolutely are capable of an upset. And again, according to betting odds here, they may not be getting the same amount of respect. But this is about Stanley Cup winners. And so the odds are a little bit different. And maybe if it was just, well, do you think they'll make the playoffs? And odds on that. But I wanted to go with Stanley Cup contenders. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. I'm very excited about this upcoming season. I do think there'll be a certain amount of unpredictability in the standings and in the West. I think it'll be a little more unpredictable than the East, but each will be equally enjoyable to watch. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.